I want to follow up on Senator Brown's questions about full employment. As you know, Congress gave the Federal Reserve a dual mandate to pursue maximum employment and to keep prices stable. The official unemployment rate is now 4.1%. Many economists are predicting the rate will dip below 4% in the near future. An unemployment rate this low in the past would have been considered full employment, which would be good news for the workers that should be accompanied by higher wages. But wages have barely budged. So let me start by asking Mr. Powell, given that wage growth is so weak, do you believe that the labor market is currently at full employment?
So full employment is not a sort of a precise concept in our thinking, in my thinking. And I think a number of indicators would suggest that we are at or around full employment. But I'll point to a couple that suggest that maybe there's more room for growth in the labor market. And those would be, in particular, wages, which you cited. There's no indication in wages that the labor market is overheating or even hot. And that there's
how about stone cold?
Well, we have
to people who are trying to live on those wages, I think that's how they feel.
So you have growth of about 2.5%, which is roughly in keeping with increases in productivity and inflation. But nonetheless, it's not as fast as that growth is not as fast as it was at other cyclical peaks or before the crisis. So that's an indicator, I would agree with you, that suggests a lack of tightness in the labor market.
So let me just push on that a little bit, because one possible explanation for the breakdown in the relationship between low unemployment and increasing wages is that the labor market is not actually that tight. As you know, individuals who aren't actively looking for jobs aren't counted as unemployed under the traditional U3 unemployment measure that the Federal Reserve relies on. A better measure of the strength of the labor market might be the prime age employment rate, which is simply the population aged 25 to 54 who actually hold a job. And as of last month, the prime age employment rate was only 78.8%. In other words, almost 1 in 4 prime age workers, that's 24 million Americans, don't have a job. And while the prime age rate has been increasing, the proportion of prime age workforce who actually have jobs is well below the high that was set back in 2000. So, Mr. Powell, there are a lot of reasons why the prime age employment rate is so low, but I want to focus on one that is not typically on the Federal Reserve's radar. According to recent research by Princeton economist Alan Kruger, about 44% of prime age out-of-work men said they had taken pain medication within the preceding 24 hours, and about 2/3 of them are taking prescription pain medications. So, Mr. Powell, if you're confirmed as chair of the Fed, how does this affect what you will do as Fed chairman to achieve full employment?
Well, let me just agree with everything you said about prime age participation. That's the other place I was going. Is a full percentage point lower than it was before the crisis, and there's no real obvious reason for that. That also suggests some slack. In terms of participation by prime age males, and particularly Alan Kruger's research, what we can do is we can push harder on maximum employment. I think we're doing that. I think we are looking at an economy that's going to go under 4% unemployment. Ultimately, though, the tools for dealing with the opioid crisis and with the long-term 60-year decline in participation by prime age males, those are tools that Congress really has to wield, not so much the Fed.
So just to make sure I'm following this, it's your opinion that in order to ensure that the United States labor market is reaching its full potential, Congress needs to deal with the opioid crisis. Is that fair?
Yes.
So I want to ask you about one other factor holding back prime age workers. More than twice as many prime age women are out of the labor force as prime age men. And according to a recent study by the Hamilton Project, more than half of women who are on the sidelines in the labor market cite that they aren't working because of caregiving responsibilities, either for children or for seniors. Mr. Powell, how can the Fed bring women who aren't working due to caregiving responsibilities back into the labor market?
again, we don't really have those tools.
Good. And that's really the point I wanted to make here. I appreciate your making the point that the opioid epidemic and the lack of paid family leave are holding back workers, and that Congress has to do something on both fronts. If you're confirmed as chair of the Federal Reserve, I hope you will promise to come before Congress to advocate for policies to make our labor market and our economy stronger for everyone. Thank you, Mr. Powell.
Thank you, sir.
I'll take that as a yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.